And welcome to another session of Consulting Growth Insights Live. Sorry for being late here. I had some technical difficulties with LinkedIn Live. Yay. So if you were, hopefully some of you have found your way over to the main recording studio here. This should be streaming in my LinkedIn profile and also on YouTube and whatnot. But yeah, anyway, Brian Curlin is here with me from Optitude, and we are going to talk about shifting from a founder-led sales motion. Um, and it's an um, interesting problem because on the one hand, founder-led sales is kind of a magic bullet, if you will, if one exists in this business. That's about as magic as it gets to a certain point. And then it kind of becomes a crutch and a problem. And that transition, especially in consulting and agencies and any sort of professional services business, that's that shift from that transition from founder-led sales is a very difficult one. So, Brian, I'm gonna kick us off with a little scenario. It's a make-believe scenario, but I'm sure you will recognize it from the work that you do with your clients.
That sounds good.
Um, what I generally see is like a lot of these for like boutique firms, they start with, somebody that's got a ton of expertise, either from industry or from a larger consulting firm. They're the executive or a really high level SME, and they get burnt out, they get tired, and they go, screw this, I can do this on my own. And they start a firm. Right. First, they're on their own, they're an independent consultant, then, they gain more business, then they maybe hire a few people, either contractors or full-time people. They grow to a certain point and they go, okay, well, as far as I can take it, I'm going to bring in a partner. And they bring on a partner. And they do the same thing, right? And this thing grows just based on their network and their skill or lack thereof in business development. Um, and then the partner skill and that same thing. But then obviously you're only going to bring in so many partners into a boutique firm. Like you're not going to have
Mm-hmm.
a 25 person firm with 25 partners. Like that's just crazy. Not to mention like the dilution of, of capital or of shares and whatnot. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then these firms stall out, right? They stall out usually, I don't know about you, but I've seen it roughly right around that $5 million mark.
Mm-hmm.
And they stall out because the founder just can't, like they're at capacity. And so are the partners that they brought in.
Yeah.
And herein lies the problem, right? What worked, it's sort of the typical, what got you here won't get you there thing.
Yeah.
Um, that's the scenario I see over and over and over again. I'm curious what you have to say about that. Is that typical on your side as well?
Yeah. Well, listen, no easy questions, right? No softballs here. You get right into it, which I love. And how we talked a little bit in preparing for this conversation is, yeah, I mean, that's why we started Optitude, is that was the main focus, is that we saw a number of different, what we call professional services expertise, the boutique consultant, however you want to describe it, start their business because they had that expertise. And, normally that individual had enough clients. To your point, they came from a bigger firm, they brought those clients with them, or they established themselves in a marketplace where they were considered an expert amongst a small group of individuals. And then they leaned on those networks, those network referrals to build their pipeline. And to your point, while that's great to get started, we believe, and we've seen over the last 7 years in working with clients, is that it does stall out. And there's a number of reasons what we believe and what we see why it stalls out. But that stalling out piece is that mostly from our experience, there's never been a system or process built behind the founder or the expert that started the firm. So more specifically, what we
Yep.
mean by that is, the rainmaker, the person that had a network showed up, started to bring in clients and maybe a few people to help deliver that work. But then that rainmaker or the founder had that entire process of kind of how they engage with new prospects in their head. So there was never something that was taken out of their head, put into a system, put in a process. And in today's world, you can do that with technology. You can start to automate and make the system much more efficient. And obviously, a lot more stuff comes down the line from there. But we tend to see it show up in organizations between, I mean, it's maybe as early as sub 1 million, like high 6 digit firms that are just a couple years into their business, or between maybe 1 and 5 million. I think you said five.
Yeah.
We see it start to the symptoms start to expose themselves
Yeah.
between 1 and 5. And there's a whole bunch of different symptoms that we see. But,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, it's not a hard and fast rule by any means, but I feel like on average, the $5 million mark is where I see it kind of break.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely symptoms. I mean, look, what you're describing, it happened to me. So when I was running my first agency, I did that, right?
Yeah.
I was the rainmaker. I mean, when we were starting out, I had no sales experience. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. But I did some sales training over time, picked up a few tricks, if you will, learned how to sell to business, etc. And I was okay. But then I remember, we were at about like just north of 1 million, and I wanted to start bringing in business development. Like I wanted to build a team because I didn't want to be the only one selling.
Yeah.
Which it's one of the core problems with this model is founder burnout. Because I mean, there's the pressure of like, well, it's all on you, but then it's just you're just always at capacity because you're always going, balls to the wall of sell, 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 and oh, by the way, still run the business and do and set the vision and manage the team and maybe even do some client work and all this stuff. Right? It's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
So anyway, I remember like we went through. I'm trying to remember either 2 or maybe even 3 people in that role, and nobody worked out. And I'm like, what the hell? How is this possible? Like, don't these people know what they're doing? And it's like, it wasn't them, it was me.
Well, sure. Yeah. It's well said. I mean, the fact that you're willing to kind of share that experience, we see it a lot, exactly how you described it. And there's a couple major challenges that come up. Number one is, let's be really frank and forward to talk about the pain of the dollars invested in hiring somebody is you can't get that money back, or the time it takes to quote unquote onboard a say I don't know if you went like, hey, I'm going to higher level director of sales, someone with a bit of experience, where you go junior that comes in and says, oh, I'm going to help operationalize maybe top of funnel, middle of funnel type of work.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that in my scenario, I mean, this was years ago, like we probably wasted, I don't know, call it somewhere between 150 to 200 grand over a period of a year, probably bringing in people.
Nuts.
And nothing, like I don't remember. I honestly think they brought in like, if not zero, then maybe one deal, and I don't think that deal closed.
Right.
So, and again, it's really not on them. We had no process. The process was in my head, and the language was in my head. The IP was in my head, which is that's a big part of the solution actually. But that we can get into solutions in a bit.
Yeah, it's a very significant problem. We've had a chance to work with clients that unfortunately had that problem. We've obviously helped solve it. But to your point, if founders can catch that sort of situation before they invest in the people aspect, number one, it's a better investment internally to the organization to get the systems and processes up and running, because you want to make sure that you even have a starting point and then start to experiment from there. And then if you feel like you got something that's somewhat repeatable, there's some predictable way that you bring in leads or prospects, then there could be an opportunity to start thinking about talent to fill that role.
Well, that's maybe. I want to spend the bulk of our time talking about solutions to this, but I think it's important to talk through the problems that this creates over time within a firm. We mentioned, I mentioned one, there's burnout. We talked about stalled growth already, and that's kind of inevitable. And again, where people will stall really is a function of the size of their network, the quality of their network, their ability to sell, amongst other things, not to mention the market itself and all sorts of stuff. But it will stall at some point. Lack of process we talked about. I feel like there's, the problem of pipeline volatility, right? Because this let's say in my situation, everything came through me. So if I wasn't selling, nobody else was.
Yeah. Fill the moat,
Meaning, and if I get
train the
bogged
moat.
down at that point, I was still doing, I remember some client work. Obviously, I was overseeing the team,
Hmm.
all this other stuff. If I'm not selling, nobody else is, and major client fire drill, all of a sudden there's no sales activity for a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoops,
Totally.
that's a problem, right? Like
Yeah.
that happens. And even if you have multiple people, like, okay, fine. So maybe you're a $3 million firm with 2 or 3 partners. Well, you probably have multiple client fire drills at a time, and you have whatever family stuff comes up, who knows, right?
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, again, sales activity doesn't happen for a couple weeks.
Yeah, we kind of, I mean, the way you're describing it, we agree with all those symptoms. We've seen them exactly the same way. Show up maybe a bit differently based on the size of the organization. We work with organizations. It sounds like you do too, and experiences. Their average client value from a contract perspective is 5 figure, 6 figure, 7 figure deals. So these
Yep.
are complex sales. These aren't transactional. So to
Yep.
your point, the pipeline has to be full enough, and should be, if you are the founder, should be able to be projected and predictable to see that sort of motion as prospects and leads go through the quote unquote funnel and
Yep.
sales process. That's ideal, right? But to work back from there, the way you describe it, we've had this term, you've probably heard it out in the marketplace, when it's the founder or partners that are bringing in prospects, when they are working on BD to bring in prospects, we call it like they're filling the lake, right? They fill the lake with these deals,
Yep.
and then it's full of water, and then all of a sudden it's delivery time. Everyone gets shifted to delivering the service, and the lake starts to it looks like
Yep.
the dead of heat in the summer, and there's nothing
Yep.
other than
You're
foggy
talking
bottom.
to an Arizonan here. Like I've heard all the. It's very,
That's
very
right.
timely now.
Yeah, and that's what happens, and then you have this inconsistency, which you talked about. But the other thing that maybe we could touch on is think about what it does for even if it's a small boutique firm, so half dozen people that work there. It creates what we call absolute chaos. Chaos in the sense that nobody really has a specific role inside of the organization. That's not just the founder that has an ability to bring in or operationalize leads to prospects to close.
Hmm.
And then you have this, let's hurry up, let's take care of all these clients, let's deliver on services. And then that
Yep.
gets and then all this chaos starts again. And so this ramp up and down starts to happen.
It's the
And not
feast
only
and famine cycle.
that's it. Yeah. You burn out the founder, you burn out the team, and
Yep.
it's not a great way to try to grow a business. It's very discomforting, and it usually leads to firms closing their
Yeah,
shop.
and even the related to that, you have like there's risk in the client experience as
Mm,
well,
mm-hmm.
right? So if the founder is doing all the sales and the business development, they're the face of the business, the face of the firm, and then all of a sudden delivery starts. Well, the founder is nowhere to be seen because they're focused on sales,
All right.
right?
Yeah.
Which is fine to a certain extent, but if that's not handled appropriately, it creates this weird thing. Like, wait a second, well, I thought Mike was doing the work.
Yeah. No one
Mike's
accountable.
not doing the work. Who's doing the work? I've never met these people before. And
Right.
there's obvious solutions to that problem, but
Yeah.
and then the last one, which is it's not typically talked about, but I've seen it. It's one of those like it's sort of like it's an unseen issue until it's an issue, which is the entirety of the market feedback loop goes to the
Mm,
founder.
right.
So your delivery team or your account management team or whatever your operations team, like all the people that are responsible for maybe even like developing new service lines and things like
Mm-hmm.
that, they have no idea what's going on in the market because everything is going through the founder.
Yeah.
And no, sure, again, there's some solution to that in terms of disseminating that information, but still there's no replacing kind of first person feedback.
Yeah.
Not saying that everybody should be doing that, but
Well,
it
your
does
point.
create this challenge of understanding the market.
Yeah, I think you're pointing to a really important part of where businesses are in their growth journey. So let's even back up half a step because companies definitely, boutique consultancies are that fact that start this way. It's totally the right way to start, right? You have to create that sort of bridge between no prospects to prospects from trusted relationships, right? That's the fastest way to do it. Everyone in this listening to this that has that experience realizes that's the way to go. However, once you kind of get past that, you should quickly start thinking about how do you, and you maybe, I think you use this term a little bit in some of the work you do, how do you align everybody around the core problem we're trying to solve and position ourselves in the
Yep.
market, the sales and marketing engine that we're
Yep.
building of what problem are we going to solve and what way are we going to solve it uniquely different to the market, and how does everybody here inside this organization, how do we align everybody around that sort of those core principles so we can, to your point, execute on the delivery of our value proposition. I know these are things that everyone can sit down and speak to, including you and I, but man, when that starts to show up with inconsistency, then it's likely there isn't a sales process or a
Yep.
business development kind of rhythm that is there for the organization to align around.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a couple of things that you said. I mean, um, I think we can tackle the same things from slightly different angles. Like I
Yeah.
talk about it in terms of like democratizing the IP within the organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I mean, I can't tell you the number of firms I've been I've worked with and seen inside of where it's like it's the founder's face everywhere. Like
Right.
they wrote the book and the cover of the book has their face on it.
Right.
They run a podcast and the podcast cover art has their face on it. Right. It's them. They own the IP, like all the frameworks, whatever, etc. Like and people like the rest of the firm knows about them, but nobody is allowed to kind of really and isn't enabled to evangelize it because a lot of it lives in the founder's head, like
Mm-hmm.
outside of maybe the book or whatever. So that's maybe
Mm-hmm.
a different example, but like creating a system in an environment where those frameworks and methodologies are part of the culture, if you will,
Yeah.
and everybody can speak to them, especially call it like whatever, maybe it's department heads or etc. Like anybody can go to a conference and talk about the IP and kind of give the a valuable lesson that's based on that IP.
Yeah.
Um, that is where I think some of the magic starts to happen, right? Because you start democratizing it where, well, now it's not just the founder that can be a thought leader, it's all these other people, right?
Yeah.
And then it might still be that the founder or the partners are doing a lot of the business development work, but they're not having those initial conversations. They're not prospecting anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, we tend to think about that in this the world we operate in is productizing services, where there is a methodology to the madness of the expert that came in. It could be again, they don't have to come from another firm. They could have just started the firm because they were an expert videographer or they were a interior designer that was an expert. You name the expertise. Engineers who work with engineering firms, they have unbelievable competency and technical competency in that skill, but they've never formulated into a place where someone else can articulate this is what we're good at, this is how we do it, and this is how we deliver it for our clients. So that you can speak to it in a clear and articulate way that if you're not the founder, do it that those that are interested in your services can clearly understand it. So it is easier said than done. It's probably why the great work you do in other firms that help kind of get that clarity. But once there is a kind of system and strategy around that sort of expertise, then it's a lot easier to replicate it.
Yeah. So, and the other thing, which you already mentioned a couple of times, it's, really codifying the sales process. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
once you have this environment where, again, as I say, the IP is democratized, now it's okay, how do we take these conversations that all of these people are now having,
Mm-hmm.
how do we take that and turn those, at least some portion of those, into business conversations and fill up the pipeline, etc. So
Yeah.
what are the maybe talk a little bit about that in terms of what can founders and what can firms do to do that? Like what should they be
Yeah.
focused on?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we believe that the first step is before you really put a dollar into any of these services to try to figure out these problems, even if it's internal, if you choose not to work with an organization like yours or mine, you could really step back and be like, first of all, what historically has happened in our firm? And we like to think of it as getting clarity around the existing business. And so a good way to start with is when we founded the firm, insert firm name, what, what was the key problem? We chose to solve more problems in the marketplace. Like go back to the early days and make sure there's still clarity and alignment around that. The second, and obviously very overlooked, which I'm sure you have seen this too, which is very surprising to us, is that the ideal customer that might have these problems that you originally started the firm to solve has evolved, and therefore the firm that has been running around this process of trying to qualify and prospect clients has to evolve its ideal customer, right? And there's a lot of work that has to go into that, but it's
Yeah.
clear if you don't have that moving with you as the organization grows, we believe you should be looking at that once a quarter, once a year minimally.
We're on the same page there. 100% agree. Minimum once a year.
Yeah, minimum once a year. And then that leads to what I think is really the best way to think about. We call it the gold. Some of the best gold is at the feet of the founder. What's one of the way of really saying that is that we think that companies that have gotten past a million or a million to 5 million have enough history of what I call ideal customers or high value customers that have one, they've delivered great service. Two, they've showed up and kind of had the problems that your firm
Yeah.
was trying to solve, and they've been profitable. They've been willing to refer you. We call those like your ideal. Like those are the best customers. Those customers you should go back and look at. What are the characteristics? We call it like a revenue win or an ideal customer review.
Yep.
You'll find, we tell clients all the time, you'll find so much gold in the patterns, the consistency, where you found them, how they went through the sales process. You kind of want to go back in there, dig that up, and start thinking about those patterns will give you a lot of gold to unlock the future.
Yeah, 100%. So a couple of things to echo the word alignment. Completely agree on with you. I think there's, especially in like multidisciplinary, multi-partner firms, it's amazing how often you get in and there isn't alignment. Like it seems like there is at the you visit their website, it looks like they're heading in some direction,
Right.
but then you start talking to people and one partner thinks, well, no, we're going to grow this way, and the other partner goes, well, we're going to grow this way, and the third one goes, well, actually, I don't agree with either of these, we're going to go this way. It's these people that we're going to service. So yeah, definitely alignment on the ICP is critical.
Huge.
And I think you kind of touched on this, and people stop at like the basic firmographics and things like that. They'll look for the patterns, but they're like, oh well, our ICP is, I don't know, mid-market manufacturing firms with IT teams of at least 50.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean that's great.
It's like base level stuff there.
But that's not enough. Not for a boutique firm, right?
No.
Like, yeah, sure. If you're if you're one of the big, MBB or whatever, then fine. Yeah, you can create that as a segment and target away. Even for them, that's probably too broad. But
yeah,
like you have to get very, very specific. And I like what you talked about in terms of looking at it from different lenses. That people are like, oh well, who are your ideal clients? What's the people that pay me the most? Not always. For that matter, sometimes those are the worst ones.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, your biggest contract is with these two clients, but do you really want to work with these types of businesses? Because nobody on your team likes working with them.
Yeah.
The profit margins are actually lower, even though the total, net number is higher, obviously because they're paying you more. So is that really your ideal client? Right. And then do they give you referrals? No, they don't. I'm making that up. Obviously, some of them would.
Totally.
Like the whole referral questions is an interesting one. I like that one. Well, where do you get the most referrals from?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's this sector. Why is that?
Yeah.
Let's unpack that a bit. So yeah, 100. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, it's probably the one thing that has caught us off guard the most in the last 7 years of doing this work. That when we begin all of our client work with something called a collaborative diagnosis. Why that's so important is we're basically getting the founder to give us the inputs to the things underneath the hood that either one, they likely haven't looked at that level, or two, they haven't, because they're so busy, running the firm, they haven't had the time to do it. And so once you kind of step back and see all that data, and then I'm sure you do this too, when it's really hard to look from inside the bottle and read the label, right?
Yep.
So we can help them do that and say, hey, look, here's what we see in the growth systems you have or have not built. Here's the priority. And surprisingly, almost always at the top three, the ideal customer profile, the segmentation of the nuance of what are these customers that you're trying to serve thinking about? What are they really
Yep.
saying about the problems? Like all of the stuff that I know you and I totally understand. It's like that deep work is just not done as much as I think could be done. Which why I say that is it totally helps everything else downstream: sales,
Yep.
marketing, alignment, etc. So it's been an eye opener for us. We obviously help clients do that, but it's definitely something I think we would call out for those that are in that situation to dig into.
Yep. Yeah, and I think maybe one last thing to touch um, on the ICP side of things. I think a lot of it happens because for two reasons. One is I think it's fear. So
Mm.
they're afraid to niche down, going, oh no, well yeah, it's Fortune 500s. Is it really?
There's only but yeah, there's enough of those, but everyone's going for them, right?
Right. Well, there's that, and it's like, well, is it really just Fortune 500s? Is there anyway, like that kind of thing? But then
Yeah.
also the other part is, I think the various social and marketing platforms have allowed people to easily confuse
Mm.
targeting with ICP definition. It's like,
True.
oh, well, it's companies of this size with in this industry and that use these tools. Sure, yeah, that's fine. But
Yeah.
that's not enough, right? Like just layering in some sales navigator filters is not that's not ICP definition.
No.
Um, so
That
um,
it does take people off course because it's easy to get, and I think you're hinting at it or at least alluding to it. You can get a lot of data, but if that data doesn't really align to your original business purpose and to the objective of the problems you're trying to solve in whatever
yeah,
organization you're running, you can. And I think you even said this in earlier. You can get way off course by
mhm,
starting to work with clients that are way outside of your ideal
yeah,
customer, and your business starts to form around that. And you're like, I don't even like the business I run anymore, right? That's what
yep,
you hear a lot of people say when they get caught in that scenario.
yep. Well, and let's tie this back to again the whole concept here is how do you transition from the founder-led sales motion? Well, if you have a very broad ICP definition, which is whatever, it's Fortune 500 manufacturing company,
Mm-hmm.
Fortune 1000 manufacturing companies.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you bring in a business development director. What are they going to do with that?
Not much, in my opinion.
I mean, unless they're coming from the exact same industry and even then, like people make that mistake. Oh, I'll just hire somebody with a Rolodex.
Oh,
They're used to selling something different. They're not used to selling your services.
that's right.
And a common one I've seen is like they'll bring in people that sell software or something else. It's like, well, they're used to selling software. They're not used to selling a complex service or whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's hard to find that perfect fit that has everything. And if they don't have it all, then giving them something so broad, like it's no wonder they fail.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, I think we we try to offer the recommendation that somebody hiring somebody to take over the BD role or even to bring a junior in should likely shouldn't be done until there is enough motion in the business to understand the amount of leads, where they're coming from, are they actually qualified, and are you building some sort of motion around getting that pipeline at least full enough?
Yeah.
Because if you don't have marketing, in this case, working on that behalf, and sales aligned, or BD, whoever is aligned to that sort of work, no, I have very rare. There are a few. There are a few. Let's be honest. That can come in and kind of figure that all out.
Yeah.
But it's the few, not the many. And the many that come in to try to that are asked to do that and be like, oh yeah, I'll bring in my Rolodex, or I'll bring in my knowledge of how to close deals. Is you you will burn more money faster, and we've seen it that than an organization of that size, boutique wise, which can
Yep.
be very
I've done
very
it,
daunting
so
to
I
come.
can vouch for
Yeah,
that.
yeah. We think that those motions can be built by probably working on it
Yeah.
themselves, working with
So what I
you.
mean, what size of I don't know if it's a size of organization or like what volume are you looking for? Like, is there a rule of thumb that you look for? Like, okay, here's where it makes sense to start considering building out the team.
Yeah, we see it. It depends on a couple statistics that I'm sure the audience will be familiar with. Number one is that you have to have a motion of what is the cycle time to close on a prospect that you bring in that's not a referral. And what I mean by
Yeah.
that is like, hey, you and I have friends in the business. They get to know, they spend time introduced to me or you in our business. We talk to them one time and we close the deal and they're a client.
Right.
That's not an average cycle time to close between a new prospect that was potentially unaware of you, unaware of your problem, to the fact that you pulled them all the way through a sales cycle and closed. That number one is the first metric we try to garner around. Is the company ready? And what we're trying to look for is that's an average time to determine a new prospect, to follow them all the way through the pipeline, to make sure that the pipeline actually is working.
Yeah.
So let's say it's 3 months. So if their pipeline isn't full enough for 3 months worth of client work, then bringing somebody in is not going to solve it. It's just going to be a waste of money. So that's
Yeah.
one example of a data point we would use. The second is, has the founder ever even mapped out, or a partner, founder, et cetera, ever mapped out the sales process they use to successfully close a deal, even if it was a referral? What was the first touch point? What was the communication of the value proposition? How did they follow up? What were the steps and activities? Like, just even doing that is a great starting point to determine whether or not someone can actually follow that map, that roadmap. So those are two at least.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting to me there, kind of a couple of things you mentioned, right? It's, I would guess that maybe not most, but at least a good portion of the people that are struggling with this, they have enough volume. Like the founder is getting enough volume through.
Mm-hmm.
The problem isn't that there's not enough volume; it's that they haven't documented anything. It's just it's ad hoc every time. Nothing looks the same, and they just happen to be good at having sales conversations, right? They're charismatic. They have good ideas. Like there's maybe some semblance of IP, but it hasn't been completely documented, etc.
Yeah.
And what I find interesting about that situation is that the solution, both in the short term, is actually to improve and scale the founder-led motion, is the same thing that allows it to make the shift easier, which is the documentation, like the documentation of the IP, the documentation of the process. And like part of it is like making the founder more visible out there, other than just going to events and talking to people and shaking hands.
Yeah.
Because I think in a lot of cases that's what it is. It's like, well, we're just going to go to events, we're going to meet some people, shake some hands. That's great. You can build a $5 million business that way. But if your goal is to build a $10 million business and sell, or to build a $10 million business that you're not solely responsible for driving, you need these pieces in place. So that, yes, you have to be visible, etc., but it's got to be codified.
Yeah.
Right? You have to have, IP that answers very specific questions, that makes people understand their problem. It shows that you understand their problem better than anyone else, that your firm does.
Yeah. Yeah. We would even say that, you're kind of hinting at some things too that we also agree with in this particular challenge. Is number one, if you want your firm to be sellable in the future as an asset, to either one, back to the employees, or two, to the outside market.
Ooh, back to the employee. That's a good one. I wasn't thinking about that when we were talking about, but that's an interesting one, because ESOPs are pretty popular right now.
Yeah, so. I mean, people want to see that thing live on, and I get it. But it's a key man risk, right? So that key man risk is if that person, I know always use, like, I don't know why people think about get hit by a bus, but that's always what comes up in a sidebar coffee conversation. There is no way to replicate that, what we call a go-to-market motion. And so what we're trying to do is help that individual founder, one, make that transition, which we've talked about already for quite some time, do it in that way from foundation to next level of growth, right? Because there's a whole bunch of different stages between, at least in our opinion, between 1 and 10 million.
Yeah.
The second part of that is that if you have a go-to-market motion and you wanted to go outside and see what the potential value of your firm is, one of the insights we have from people that do that work is they are looking for a very systematic way that if I'm going to invest $1 in trying to acquire a new customer, what is the return of those dollars in the system in which I put the dollar in? i.e., what is the go to market motion that this dollar goes in, prospects and finds clients that are ideal for our business. We're able to
Yeah.
deliver on that with a profit and a margin to a point that it's going to deliver me X, $3, $11, $12. When that is clear from a transition of what the business does go to market, and the key, there isn't a key man person, i.e., the founder that's only responsible for doing that, that business value jumps significantly.
Yep.
And anyone that's in the marketplace to understand that that's what they want to do in the future, it's what we see as the next
Yep.
level of growth with firms we work with.
Well, and I mean, I've literally had conversations not even weeks ago with founders who are having this challenge. They're like, and something to consider is what kind of exit do you want as a founder?
Yeah,
So,
fair.
like, one founder I was recently talking to knows this is a problem, but he's like, once I'm ready to sell, I don't want an earn out. I want cash and I want out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, at least if there's an earnout, you have, say, whatever, 2 years to train and make this transition.
Yeah.
But you don't want that earnout. You want the cash now. No one's going to give you the whatever. Say it's a $10 million firm. I mean, what's the
I've heard
like
it from
what
2 to
10 million? You are
5x
looking at like
EBITDA.
5 to 8x EBITDA at that level, is something like that.
Maybe high, depending on the EBITDA, but yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, but I get your point.
something of that. Like you're getting something at the low end, if not below the low end,
Mm-hmm.
if there's that key man problem, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because you want out right away. Like, no, why would anybody buy that? Right. Unless, again, there's different reasons. Like there's, if they're just buying the bodies and things like that because they already have a system and they're just going to like,
Right, tuck
sure.
it in.
But you're not going to get a high valuation for that person. It's strategic for them, but it's not, they can find that elsewhere.
Yeah,
So
totally.
yeah, 100%. The building a sellable asset piece is for sure a challenge for this.
No doubt. It just happens later in the journey. Once
Yeah.
people's vision
Well,
is like,
most
I'd
people
love to
don't
do
think
that.
about it,
Yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
I remember to this day a former mentor of mine. He's like, the day you start your business is the day that you should start thinking about how you're going to exit.
That's so true. Well said by
And
your
it didn't make
mentor.
sense to me initially, right? Because I'm like, what do you mean? Like I've been doing this for like 20 years.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Well said.
so the way I'm curious what you think about this. Like, what a recommendation I've made to clients in the past is like start thinking about this part of your business as a growth function and actually start building the growth function or the revenue team or whatever. And that, to start with, that's going to be a team of one. That's you. That's still the founder.
Yeah.
But really start thinking about it. Okay, you are now head of the revenue team. What are the pieces within that? Or the head of the growth team. Well, there's marketing, there's sales, there's business development. If you want to separate those two, which they formally are, like even account management and client success falls in all that, right? Like
Yep.
these are the functions that need to be developed. Great. To start with, it's probably all you. Maybe you have a director or somebody that can handle, like you might have an account director at that point.
Yeah.
Like if you're whatever, say 5-person team or something like that, it's possible.
Yeah.
But everything like you start building that function, which requires you to do the document because a function can't exist without the proper documentation.
SOPs. That's right. Yep.
Right. So what, it's the mindset shift of, oh, well, it's not just, I am not selling, I'm building a growth function. That mindset kind of gets people to think about things differently.
Yeah, I mean it's a sole principle of how we started our firm. So I think you and I again align on this, which I suspected we did, is that we refer to what you're talking about as called the inside up principle. And the foundation around that is that to grow the performance of your business is everything we've been talking about. It's strategy, systems, and practices, right? So that's like everyone gets that in the forefront. What people tend to leave behind is this idea of capacity. Capacity building is the second cornerstone of the inside up principle. It's performance and capacity has to be built around understanding what are your goals, what is the direction, what is the discipline you need to eventually remove yourself from that particular role. And like you said, all businesses start with maybe 1, 2, and then you maybe fractionalize some people and you hire some outside consultants. But at some point, you're going to need someone to take that business over, especially if you're growing to the levels we talked about, 1 to 10 million. And so understanding how to do that is it's capacity building and really clear about how I'm going to off ramp myself from those certain roles. So it is absolutely critical. And if
Yeah.
you don't do that work early enough in the business, it all
Yep.
tends to spill back to the founder.
Yep. And the something to think about is also like creating, like thinking about the end game, if you will,
Hmm.
and creating milestones along the way. So, like
Well
a
said.
lot of founders depend. I mean, some founders enjoy the BD side, and that's what they're good at, and that's what they
Hmm.
want to keep doing. Awesome. Like, don't stop doing that. You just need to build things around there, right? But some founders don't enjoy it. They do it because they have to.
Right.
And their goal is like, okay, I cannot wait until I can be big enough and hire enough people so I don't have to do this shit anymore.
That's right.
Okay. But you're not going to get from 0 to 100. There's 10, 20, 30, whatever, like in between. So, like, one thing I recommend is like, okay, let's have a milestone there be where you are only being involved in like key strategic deals.
Hmm.
Like, whatever, say you're starting a new practice area. The first deal in that you're freaking involved in. That
Hmm.
makes sense.
Hmm.
Or it's like you're leveling up and all of a sudden you're selling to enterprise. You've never sold to enterprise before. You're involved in that one, right? Like those types of things. Everything else goes to other people through a process.
Yeah.
Like that to me is step one. Or maybe not even step one, but at least like the first like exciting step that someone can look forward to. You're not gonna be doing zero. That's not gonna happen for a while.
No, gosh, no. I hope not. I mean, you want to have your
I've
finger on the
tried. It doesn't
pulse.
work.
Yeah, you don't want to hand over the keys to the revenue car to just anybody. At least that's what we experienced too. But I like the way you're thinking about it. Is anything that's that complex, definitely
Yeah.
we support the breaking it down into small pieces. Another way of thinking about it is if you have one key service that you're trying to solve and you haven't bolted on more services, so you're maybe in the earlier stages of growth.
Yeah.
We think that if you can define, let's say the sales process is clear, let's say it's documented, we kind of think of it as organizing the funnel around three layers, right? Top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of
Yeah.
funnel. The bottom of funnel is obviously closer to the close. If you can start removing yourself from the first layer, top of funnel, like
Mm-hmm.
we don't qualify, as the founder, you don't qualify, you don't jump on qualified calls, you don't do any of the work to really determine those first few steps.
Yep.
Then you've kind of pulled some of that time back, and you can obviously do that and operationalize
Yeah.
yourself into something else. The middle of the
Oh
funnel,
no, by
same
the way,
thing.
what's required for that? A clear ICP definition,
That's
because
right.
otherwise nobody can qualify.
You got it, man. Tied right, nice tie back. And in the middle of the funnel, same thing. Like once you get somebody through saying, "Hey, these are the this is the way we solve this problem for our clients.
Yeah.
This is the way we deliver our service." Let someone else, kind of in the firm, be able to deliver that. And then if you want to be the closer for a longer period of time as a founder, great. If you think you have that time in your schedule, because that's outside everything we're talking about, the key about any business is we're all in the same boat. It's 24 hours a
Yeah.
day, 7 days a week, 365. We all have the same resource of time. How you can use that time as you go through each stage of growth, at least we
Yeah.
believe, is really going to set your firm apart to
Yeah.
make quicker leaps and be able to do it from maybe segmenting the funnel, et cetera.
For sure. For sure. And the other couple other things to more tactical, maybe. I'm curious on your thoughts here. Like
Mm-hmm.
some of the things I've talked to folks about. Again, like, in my opinion, primary stuff we've talked about. Right? That we'll call it the basics. Like you have
Yeah.
to have the IP documented, the ICP documented, et cetera, et cetera. Great. You have all that. Now, like incentives are part of it,
Hmm.
right? Because a lot of these firms, say you have a firm that's whatever, 10 people. Okay. Maybe you have 3 director level and above leaders plus the
Mm-hmm.
founder
Mm-hmm.
within that.
Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty typical for a firm that size. Um, do those directors have incentives to do business development? In a lot of firms, they don't. There's
Mm-hmm.
zero. There's zero expectation set upon hire, and there's zero incentive, right? And maybe they have like a profit sharing or something, but it's not a direct incentive for them to go out and get business. It's like, well, if the business does well, you get X, whatever. That's
Yeah.
pretty typical. So a couple of things I've talked to folks about is like number one, if you're considering bringing on a leader, either promoting from above or bringing somebody in, like have that be one of the requirements, but potentially. I'm not saying everybody. Like it
Hmm.
depends on the position and whatever.
Hmm.
Depends on the structure of the firm, but it's something to consider. Have that be part of the job description, and have the compensation reflect that.
Hmm.
Obviously, for that to be successful, you have to have your process documented and the ICP, all these things, right?
Yeah.
Those have to be in place.
Yeah.
The other thing I've talked to folks about is like um, really thinking about who can you promote or shift to a BD role, either maybe at some point full time,
Hmm.
but initially maybe part time from
Hmm.
within.
Yeah.
Because the common thing I see is like, oh, well, I need to hire a business development expert. Right? It's a, whatever, call it a 10 or 15 person firm. They'll go, oh, let me hire somebody. They bring them from the outside. Even if they have things documented, they still struggle
Yeah.
because they don't know the business and it takes them too long to ramp up. And
Hmm.
even if they've been in the consulting space before, it's a different firm. Like it's just so often it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
And I'm curious on your thoughts about building somebody up from within, because like if I think about consultants, most of us have some proclivity toward business development
Sure.
because the best consultants ask the best questions and
Right.
they're generally pretty good conversationalists.
Yeah.
That's what, at least 50% of sales.
I mean, we could say that's a whole nother
Right.
dialogue to talk about that, but no, I mean, I'm just being tongue in cheek with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you touch on a few important points. The design of a firm, the vision of the firm's growth. If it's a firm building in partners and those partners are responsible for top line growth, then I think what you're alluding to makes sense, right? Aligning incentives around that is very much the history of consultancy. And so, yeah, it has to be in the job scope, and then there has to be a specific amount of KPIs that are towards those goals. Otherwise, you get a lot of people kind of pointing at everyone else. Like I thought, he
Yeah.
was responsible or she was responsible for bringing in those leads or closing those deals. So that's right on. And number one, we would definitely concur. However, we do see that can get a little clunky too, and the reason being is you don't have clear lines of what is the role and
Mm-hmm.
responsibility in BD for certain people.
Yep.
That could be around service lines. Like I like that sort of philosophy. If it's a service line leader, then they can be responsible for that part
Yes.
of the revenue, and then you could set your budget relative to those service lines.
Yep.
So totally agree with that. The idea of bringing in a junior and elevating them, taking a junior and elevating them, I really like that idea. We have seen that with a lot of our clients, a lot of our team members. See someone to kind of
Mm-hmm.
what do you call it? They're BD curious. they're
Yep.
business development sales. You're like, I kind of want to learn about how that works. Kind of tuck them under a partner's wing,
Mm-hmm.
teach them the ropes, and then as I said earlier, we're very big proponents of give them a responsibility within the sales process to see if they can start to kind
Yep.
of organize around execuing on it and do it
Yep.
over a period of time. Then if they do, then keep letting out more line, have them do
Yep.
more of that work.
Yeah. And it doesn't, I mean, in my mind, it doesn't have to be a junior necessarily. It can be a, a senior level consultant,
Mm.
principal, whatever, heck, even maybe somebody that's a director level, but that's never done BD before, but they
Sure.
have kind of like you said, they're BD curious, or they're just, again, they have the proclivity to being good at it and they want to do it.
Hmm.
Over time, you can shift them into that role, right? And again, compensation becomes a big part of it, etc.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because it's a different. I mean, in our experience, we talk about compensation. It's a way different compensation model than you're a
Yeah.
deliverer, because you're tied, very much to
Yep.
you close a deal, you get paid for that deal. So it's a incentive, performance
Yeah.
based type of
Yep.
role.
For sure. The one thing we haven't talked about, at least not directly yet,
Uh-huh.
which I think is critical to making the shift, is it's not my favorite word, but the concept of sales enablement,
Mm.
right? And I think about it in the more broader sense of enabling more of your SMEs to become thought leaders and within the ecosystem. Because again, if the only thought leader that exists is the founder,
Hmm.
that founder can't exit because as soon as it's like, if they're the only center of influence that ties your firm to the broader ecosystem,
Hmm.
if you remove that, your firm falls off falls off the radar for everybody,
That's right.
right? So, like, if you have I mean, tactically, if you have a podcast, bring on at least one co-host that's not that's going to be with the founder that can, and have them start doing more, maybe create new segments, maybe have them host, uh, if it's a weekly show, maybe once a month they host on their own or whatever it is,
Hmm.
right? Bring in guests from inside the firm that maybe they're guest hosts or they're actual guests, and you do like a round table or something.
Yeah.
I mean, most firms will do webinars and things like that, but they don't do it with enough consistency and enough to take the webinars themselves. Like, it has to be also like exciting for the audience, right? It's not just about getting another face out there. Because like, if whatever, if you and I are part of the same firm, and I say, and I'm the CEO, and I go, hey Brian, come join me on the podcast, and you and I have a conversation that sounds kind of like this, and we share some slides, and then we say bye everybody. Nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares about Brian. Nobody even cares about me at that point,
Right.
right? So it's like, how do you make this interesting for the ICP again? Um, and get exposure for these people, so that maybe from there they get some speaking gigs and things like
Hmm.
that, and you encourage that. Maybe that becomes part of your compensation as well. Like, you can get creative with this, like, hey, as part of this role, you need to be doing whatever 4 speaking engagements a year,
Hmm.
right? That's part of your the things that we're going to evaluate you on from annual review perspective or whatever,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. You can get creative with these things.
Yeah. I think so.
And it's not just about forcing it, then you got to enable it and empower people to do so.
Yeah.
And so that, like, anyway, when I think about sales enablement, it's those types of things. Like, yes, you need the assets, obviously, to allow somebody who's not the founder to go have an effective conversation as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. I think you touch on a very important point. I mean, authority leadership is paramount in the professional services space, for you to stand out. I do think it's nice when a firm is started and the name of the firm or the brand of the firm is the brand, not the person.
Yeah.
Now, it's a little bit of a tightrope because the way that a lot of us are out there in the world as thought leaders, that people are gravitating to the person, not just the brand. So you got to have both. And I think you're signaling that by doing it more than just the founder or the
Yep.
CEO. So I love that mentality. It obviously works from a go-to-market standpoint when you have multiple people out there kind of speaking in the same terms about the expertise of the firm. And then on the back end, which I think is maybe a different way of thinking about enablement, is how do you take what we're talking about and make the shift for a founder by, let's be honest, if your tech stack isn't really leveraged and efficient, as in you should have basic, like your CRM should be your basic point. You should have some sort of email system behind the scenes like ActiveCampaign or MailChimp working to push funnels. The CRM systems today are much more sophisticated, so you can do a lot of that follow up and efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
All the stuff we're talking about is enabling the founder to kind of slowly remove themselves technology wise, and then, and to your last point or your first point, I guess, to getting out in front of being a thought leader. I do think the firm can take on that responsibility to dictate who is it that we want out there to kind of put a face to the name.
Yeah, and I mean, what you said is something that I speak about all the time, which is people don't build relationships with the brand directly.
Mm-hmm.
People build affinity to a brand or a firm through relationships to people, ideas, and groups.
That's right. Well
Right?
said.
So it's which people do you want to be evangelizing your IP in which groups? I mean, at a very high level, that's how I like to think about go to
Mm-hmm.
market. And the other thing you mentioned, tech stack. One of the things that I see consistently, especially as the firm gets a bit larger,
Mm-hmm.
so once it gets above, whatever call it, 25 people, that's when you have multiple departments and things like that. Like once silos start being created,
Mm-hmm.
relationships start becoming siloed.
Yeah.
And a big part of it is, I mean, so much money gets left on the table when that happens. So there's a tech enablement component to it, whether it's, I've had David Rush on the show from Small World, things like that, where it's just, let's say the founder has 80% of the relationships in this firm. Well, let's make sure that everybody else that's now going to be pushed to do BD has access to those relationships, and then
Yeah.
knows to like, oh, hey, founder, can you make an intro to this person for me?
Mhm.
You don't have to do anything else. Just make the intro.
Yeah.
Like just that alone and enabling that to work is amazing what that can do. And a lot of firms just don't have that. It's sort of, they leave that to chance.
Yeah, we call it transferring trust,
Yeah.
right? Totally agree. It's the warm handshake that turns into an extended relationship. Now there's multiple people inside the
Yeah.
company that are close to that particular person or company, et
Yeah.
cetera.
Yeah. So if an ad hoc question here for you. So if you had to put this into I'll call it a linear process. Okay. You have a step by step, you're at founder led and you're going to shift from it. And the end goal is you're no longer founder led. What are the, I don't know, 5 steps, 6 steps along the way? In what order do they go in your opinion?
Yeah. Well, hopefully you're not trying to serve up a softball on what the framework is that we use at Optitude, but I'll certainly
I
share
wasn't actually, but go
that.
for it.
I'll share it with you. It's definitely important. You don't have to use our framework, but you need to have something to be able to guide you. At least that's what we believe if
Yeah.
you're in a founder-led sales motion. The first is you have to go through a diagnosis, right? That's the term we use. You have to step back from what's currently happening and evaluate or diagnose where you are, because you can't really set a motion or a map forward until you know where your baseline is, right? So if you can do that, or if you have people inside your organization can help you do that, foundationally get that figured out, right? Understand where you're with things we talked about. Where's your go-to-market motion? Is there a real clear ICP? Do you have a set of problems you really are clear in solving? How do you position yourself in the market? All that kind of relates to your baseline. Once you have that, then you got to establish where are we going? Context and foundation. Where were we, and where do we want to go? And where do you want to go is based on really probably not much more than the next 12 months. And why we say that is that companies go through so much change at the level we're talking about. You don't want to, I know there's a 10-year vision concept. I know the 5-year mark and the 1 year. It's really 12 months of just what are we going to do in this next year to go from where we're at baseline to the next level of growth. And you and I talked about that all this whole conversation is like, how do you make that next shift? And in doing so, you're just looking to prioritize one or two of those changes. That's where I think a lot of stuff tends to fall apart. Everyone wants to reinvent the entire wheel of business development and go-to-market motion. We just want to prioritize one or two things because it's going to take some time to work on. And in our model, it's diagnosis, context, foundation, and then what we call launch, execute, learn. LEL is what you're going to do is take those two priorities and start to make the adjustments in the organization, but make sure there's feedback loops that you're seeing the changes you want to see. That takes over anything from a period of time of what your real sales cycle is. It could be 3 months, it could be 6 months. You really want to start seeing those changes. Then once you see the changes, you can start putting more resources, time, and money into making those changes more effective or optimizing. And once you kind of get the optimizing motion working, then we start talking about the last step in our work is called future proofing that segment of your business. You've got clarity, you've got focus, context, you now have motion to start to optimize. You can put more money in the machine, and then you either remove yourself as that founder out of those 2 steps or 1 step, and then go through that same iteration in the following years going forward. So it seems like it makes sense to the people we work with, but there are lots of
Yeah.
ways to think about it. Hopefully that gives people some idea.
Yeah. No, for sure. I love it. It's a lot of similarities to how I approach things with clients. My focus, again, you're obviously coming into it a lot more from a business development perspective. I'm coming at it more from a positioning and marketing perspective. But it's at the end of the day, we're getting to the same place. So yeah, my focus is always like, let's really make sure that your positioning is in the right spot. And to me, that's
So true.
Is your ICP defined? Do you have unique IP that you can that's out there already? And if not, that obviously needs to get created, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
awesome. Is there anything we didn't talk about that around making this transition that you think is
Oh boy, I think we hit on tons of great stuff. You and I know seem to have a passion for talking about as well as working with people and and the clients that we serve. So I think it's always going to be an endless loop of an important topic here. So I think we could probably say we've hit some of the biggest nuggets. for sure.
All right. So we'll wrap up for anybody that couldn't that's watching this later because you couldn't get into the original feed. I apologize. Technical difficulties. Hopefully you're able to find this. So thank you for watching. And Brian, thank you so much for chatting.
You bet, Mike. Thank
And
you.
for all of you, I'll see you next week for another session of Consulting Growth Insights Live, where I will be chatting with another guest about what it takes to set your firm up for acquisition in the future. Thanks all. All right.
Good stuff.